Check engine lights are not the end of the world. And with a little bit of understanding and a little bit of learning, you'll see that they're a whole lot easier to understand. I've talked about in other videos about getting familiar with your truck. It's important to know how your truck works. Your emission system and your exhaust is no different. If you know how your emission system works, it's a whole lot easier to diagnose than one would think. Don't get me wrong, it can be expensive at times, but you can cut down on the amount you spend if you know how it works. Because misdiagnosis is about 90% of a shop's money. I'm not even going to lie about that. I've got several stories about that, and I'll share a couple of them with you. But getting to know your truck is important. And getting to know the emission system is also very important. But engine codes in particular, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I've got a code on this truck, so I'll show you how it works. Now, first of all, we're going to start with this little guy right here. And then when we go up to the info screen, sorry about the glare, we're going to turn the little knob right here, and it's going to say there's faults found, but there's no warnings. What that means is that there's a stored code that hasn't cleared. But if I push the brakes in, it will get a little warning pop on here. Not the triangle of death, but it'll just say service engine soon, or service, requested, or I don't know. Let's push it in, and I forgot what it said. I don't know why I would forget. It's on here every day. Service advised. There we go. Now, if you have a smart nav screen like I do, that can be real helpful. The smart nav screen, if you just push this little triangle right here, hit that, and it'll pop up that code. You can touch this. It'll give you the FMI20C operator's manual. Now, I'm aware that not a lot of trucks, or not all trucks, have this kind of, the newer trucks are a little better, but they don't have the smart nav system in. But there are different ways on the trucks to get the code from the computer and that. And if you have an e-log, a lot of times it's set up for the codes also. And it'll send the codes back to the home office so you can get a heads up. But I'll show you on the e-log. A lot of e-logs will have this little button. It may not be up front, but you hit it and it'll tell you your Focus, your J1939, and it'll tell you the same thing, the FMI and the SPN number. This right here is a cab display. It's not focusing well. And that's for actually just another light that pops up. That's just a code that will fire up sometimes when I fire up the truck for the ABS. It straightens itself out, but for some reason, I've always had that code, so that's nothing to be worried about. But the other code, there's different ways to find that. Now, like I said, if you don't have this and you don't have that setup, a $150 scanner that you can plug in from like Keep Trucking or something like that, that'll tell you those codes too. Okay, so now you have the code. You have the FMI number and all that. Now, mind you, that FMI number is very important because you'll get the same code pop up for 5 or 6 different things, but the FMI number will give you an idea on where to start and what component of that system is failing. This is where a lot of people get in trouble, and this is where a lot of shops make money, because they'll look at the code, and instead of following the directions to fix it, they just start throwing parts at it. There's lots of stories about that. No need to get into all of that, but now that you have these codes, how do you find out what they are? Well, Google is a great place to start. Now, don't get me wrong, finding the codes for your particular application, when you first start out, it's going to be a little tedious. You know, you have to really work at it to figure out your specific year, engine, and all of that. But it's not that hard. It's just a little time consuming. I get 2 codes that pop up all the time. They're just pressure codes. And I know what's causing that because I've become familiar with my system. Part of the problem is when a lot of these codes pop, people don't get familiar with their emission systems. They just take it straight to the shop. You know, to get something fixed. It doesn't have to get fixed all the time. There are a lot of ghost codes here that sometimes just pop, and eventually they will clear themselves. I've had those on multiple trucks. They're just I had one ghost code on my last company truck that would pop, but there was no fault. It was just something in it, and it would never clear. We just go in and clear it, and a couple months later it might pop up, it might not. It meant nothing. But at the same time, you know, if you get familiar with your systems, it will save you a lot of money. I'll tell you a story what saved me a lot of money. With my last truck, I started having codes that were popping pertaining to the rear axle temperature. And it started getting sensor codes for the rear axle temp and all this, and got real bad. I mean, it was popping codes and this and that, and most people be like, oh, just change the sensor, just change the sensor. I said, no. You get looking at the sensor, you get looking at the wires are fine. In fact, I'd already replaced those wires because those wires are something that breaks a lot. It's a common failure point. But I got to looking at the wires along the frame. And one day I got looking at it and realized I had a small wire that was running across the back end of a bolt. I wiggled it and it sparked. Pulled it off, wrapped some electrical tape around it, never had a problem again. How much did it cost me? $0. If I would have taken that to a shop, they wouldn't have diagnosed the wire. They would have put a new sensor on it, put a new plug-in pigtail, which was about that long, charged me $200 or $300 for that, and the problem wouldn't have been fixed. This is why I say it's important to be familiar with your truck. But we've also got some emission stories about this too, because emission systems are expensive. But they don't have to be. One of the common codes we used to have pop up a lot was catalyst plug, catalyst faulty. But you had to know the FMI numbers, but especially with the older systems on my 09, they've refined it on this truck somewhat, but you'd get the same code, catalyst code, for 5 different things. One was an actual plug catalyst, which was never the problem. You had a plug catalyst, you had a inlet pressure sensor, an outlet pressure sensor, a clogged doser, and a hole in the exhaust. A hole in the exhaust will throw a catalyst code. These exhausts are meant to be sealed. And part of the problem is guys with old school knowledge will just do old school tricks to try to fix these new trucks. That doesn't work anymore. So when your bellows pipe coming out of the engine gets a leak, a lot of guys were just putting flex pipe on there. And then it was popping catalyst codes. And then they'd get mad and delete the truck, but it would pop a catalyst code. And it wasn't a catalyst code, it was a hole in the exhaust. It happens. And I was talking to a buddy of mine that works at Cummins, and he said, you would not believe how many catalysts we've replaced because of misdiagnosis. He said it was literally a 12-minute fix for a couple of $100, and it turned into, you know, a $15,000 fix because all the shop wanted to do was replace everything. Didn't need to replace anything. They just needed to fix the hole in the exhaust. Decided to move on back because of the hole, or the sun out there. I need to clean the windows. I guess that'll happen tomorrow. But stories like that are not uncommon. Not at all. Misdiagnosis on everything is a real problem because people are lazy. Mechanics are lazy. And they just want to fix things. They just want to change parts rather than spend the time diagnosing. I can't tell you how many thousands of dollars I've been taking when I was young and stupid on my last truck. That mechanic, they took me for lots of money. We're not going back there. So now, you've got your engine code, you got your FMI number, you've got an idea what's wrong. Now, once you Google it, this is where a lot of people get in trouble. You need to kind of look at the whole scope of things, because you'll have things come up for Freightliners, but Freightliners had Cummins engines in them at one time. Did they? Yeah. And you had, and you'll get a whole variety of trucks, this, that, and the other thing, and try to find something close. But as you're Googling it, you don't even have to go into it, because a lot of these places, once you click in, what they really want is you to subscribe to a service. But if you just read the headers and you start seeing a lot of common words, you'll start getting a good idea of where you're at. And there are a lot of sites out there that will give you complete lists. In fact, I downloaded a PDF file that I didn't dare try to print because it was almost 900 pages of every single last Cummins code out there, from code number 1 to code number 520,912 or something like it was insanely high. But as you start digging into it, you're going to start finding common themes. But truthfully, codes are no reason to freak out until you start getting the stop engine light and things like that happen. Then you should be worried. But I mean, you should be worried about codes to be anyways, but there's no need to lose your mind. You're going to have to take each code individually. Some codes are fluke. Every now and then I'll get a D-rate code and then it'll just go away. That happens on these trucks. You get a little dirt in there, get a little something, it throws a D-rate code, then it just clears itself. That happens on our new trucks, new company trucks. Happened on this truck a couple of times. Usually it happens on a Sunday when I can't get anybody to look at it. But if you start having codes that start being regular and coming and going and coming and going like my two codes, it's not anything to be too completely worried about, but it is something that you need to keep a level of concern about, because eventually these codes will have to get fixed. These are parts that are starting to fail. And I know why they're starting to fail. That's why I'm not really worried about it. And I'll tell you why. So, why am I worried? Because I know what these codes are. These codes in particular, while they are pressure codes, I know what causes them. It's usually fluttering the foot pedal, or going up a hill, or going down a hill, or hills. And but it also, has to do with, I think the doser is starting to plug. So here shortly, when I get the moment, we're gonna have the doser cleaned. We're gonna do a good burn. We're gonna clean it all up, get things ready to go. And I'm probably gonna be replacing some of the exhaust behind the burner. It's not critical, but if you start leaving unburnt DEF on those things, they will start rusting and corroding. That's the bad thing about DEF. But so you have to keep all that cleaned up and all. So I'm going to be replacing some pipes. They're not rusted or corroded, but you can see where it's wanting to start, so you have to keep it clean. And then I'm going to replace some clamps, and that'll solve my problems. But how did I get to that point? Well, trial and error, and I just had to work to get to it. Your results may vary. Now, first of all, I want to be very clear. I'm not advocating being cheap. A lot of these trucks are designed where you have to have a service tool. They want you to take it to the shop. I get that. But if you have a good place to go that works with you and all that, and you have the time, and time is money out here. So the less we're screwing with the shop, the more money we're making. And that's an important thing to realize. You have to find a healthy balance between the two. That's why knowing how to read codes and knowing how to get the answers that you need on the fly are very important. There's all sorts of resources out here for that. And what I've told you about is just, 3, maybe 4 resources that you can use to help make you more profitable in what you're doing here. Because if you take it to a Kenworth to get a check engine light looked at, it could be a day or 2. It could be nothing. That's why it's important to know what you're doing, because in that day and a half, if it ends up being nothing, you can actually make it back to your shop. Or you can make it back to a shop that can see you now. If you're 1,000, 1,500 miles away from home and you get a check engine light and you start freaking out and you run straight to the shop, you've lost a day. You've lost money. And we're not out here to lose money. That's why understanding your truck and going over it from stem to stern is so vitally important in the grand scheme of things. I did a video, last year on why I fired my mechanic. And it was because of things like this. When I was younger, I trusted these people to have my best interest in mind when I took it to the shop. Sadly to say that while there are a lot of good shops out there, there's a lot of crappy mechanics. There's a lot of lazy mechanics. And people don't hire mechanics anymore to diagnose. They hire techs. You can pay a tech less money. That's why they hire techs. And what I've been noticing on YouTube, is half of these guys that do a lot of this automotive stuff, if they can't plug it into a computer, they're completely lost. And that's all anybody wants to do. They want to plug it in a computer, take the easy route, throw a part at it, bill the driver, and send them down the road. We're getting you out as fast as we can. Yeah, but if I got to come back 3 times, you've screwed me. That's the part. You don't want to come back 3 times. So this is why I'm talking about this. Learn your truck. Learn your codes. It doesn't have to be detrimental. So with that, maybe, yeah. So with that, I guess I'll let you all go. Just a short one. Something I'd been thinking on. Getting to... I got to do something with that. Getting familiar with your truck. Understanding your engine codes. The emission system, while it is expensive, doesn't have to be expensive all at once. If you look at the maintenance plan and the way they talk about it and the shelf life of these things, it's really designed to be replacing 2 or 3 things at a time, small things, at intermittent intervals. That way you can keep the cost down. But theoretically, if you change out these components when they're supposed to be changed out, rather than deferring the maintenance, theoretically you're not going to have the breakdowns that you have. That's the idea behind the shelf life. Most people just run things till they break and then they fix it, and then we get what we got now. But that's up to you. So, like I said, it doesn't have to be detrimental, and a lot of times it's not. It's just misdiagnosed. So, get familiar with your trucks. Learn your emission system. It's not as hard as people think. It's not really that complex. It's just, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just an overpriced catalyst system, so it is what it is. So I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Be profitable out there, guys. We're out here, so I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next video.